Devils Wednesday. This is the State of the Fan Address presented by pucksandpitchforks.com. I'm your host, Sam Wu, here with the editor-in-chief of that fine website, Nick Villano. Streaming live on Facebook Live, YouTube Live, X Live, and Twitch on the Let's Go Devils Network. Talking about Devils hockey. Maybe talking about, can the Devils play Panthers hockey? I wonder.
You want me to just jump right in?
Yeah, let's cut the music. Let's get to it because I'm pumped up. I know that our fans are pumped up in the YouTube Live. Hello, everybody. And the Facebook Live and X. This has been a subject for about a year, maybe 2 years now. And right. I think we got a nice sample size of the Florida Panthers, what it can do. So why don't you jump right into it, Nick?
First, before I get into it, do you think that the Panthers are winning the same way the Lightning won? I'm just curious.
No. So,
I think we're just we have run into the rare back-to-back dynasty type situation. I don't. It's kind of like, didn't we run into this with the Oilers and the Islanders? Didn't the Oilers dynasty run right into the Islanders dynasty, or the other way around? Didn't the Islanders dynasty run right into the Oilers dynasty?
Correct.
So we're kind of dealing with a similar situation where a team finds it's just this magical connection of players that fit so perfectly together, and that's what that Islanders team was. And then when the Oilers came over from the WHA, they had Gretzky, obviously, but they got Messier. I forget how they got Messier. Messier was on a different WHA team. But maybe Cleveland or Cincinnati, or I think it was on Cincinnati. I can't remember for sure, but Messier ended up on the Oilers. You had this magic connection, two of the greatest of all time. And, the same thing, the Islanders had Bossy and Trottier and a couple, again, you just get a few of the greatest of all time, and you would think that would be the argument for the Oilers, right? Because they get Draisaitl and McDavid together along with Bouchard, right? They got incredibly lucky because they signed Bouchard to the deal that they did when they accidentally overpaid Darnell Nurse. And, they basically even out. If you literally flipped their contracts, everybody would be happy. If you were paying Bouchard $9 million, and I think Bouchard makes like $6 million now. If you've paid Nurse $6 million, I think everybody would be fine with that. But it's actually the Panthers who just have this magical connection. And it happened after the Tkachuk trade, right? Bill Zito is a masterful GM. He saw exactly what he needed. I think Tkachuk kind of forced his way there. I think he only gave the Flames so many options. I do know that the Devils really tried, and our GM is Matthew Tkachuk's cousin, and Tkachuk still said no. He didn't want to come here. So, I would imagine every team was in on Tkachuk. But the Panthers made the move to get him, and he was like the piece, right? But the moves that they were making before then is what set the stage for this, and it's where the Devils can emulate Florida. I want the Devils. There's one issue with this what I'm about to say, because I think the Panthers had leeway. Like, Zito had a little gravitas to make some mistakes if he needed to. He could take some chances on some guys, and I'm afraid that Tom Fitzgerald doesn't feel like he has that, and he probably doesn't. He's probably on the hot seat this offseason if he doesn't make the right moves. But I want the Devils to take a look at players who were taken in the top 10 who haven't hit that ceiling. I'm not talking about like overall busts, but I'm talking about guys who maybe aren't exactly like you don't have to spend the cost that it takes to get a top 10 pick. And I'm trying to look at these trades that they made. So obviously I'm talking about Sam Bennett and Sam Reinhart are the two. So for Sam Reinhart, they traded Devon Levy and a 2022 first round pick. That's not nothing. Ironically, they traded for Sam Bennett just 3 months earlier. And for Sam Bennett, they traded Emil Heineman and a 2022 second round pick. Obviously, it's a much smaller price. But they saw two players who were in Buffalo. One was in Buffalo, one was in Calgary. They weren't hitting their ceiling, right? They were in the NHL, but they weren't hitting their ceiling. And at this point, so it was 4 years ago that they were like in 24, 25, somewhere in that range. And they brought them in. And this is before the 21-22 season. And is that the President's Trophy season? No, the next one was the President. No, that was the President's Trophy season,
22,
right?
22. Yep.
So they were very important pieces. And they made like bold moves, like they gave up Anton Strawman for free, basically. They actually paid a second round pick to get rid of Strawman. What else did they do that offseason? I'm just looking at some of the trades they made. They traded away Frank Vetrano at the trade deadline, which was an interesting move. They traded for Olyu Levy, and then they gave up the first round pick for Ben Sherratt, and then traded Owen Tippett and a first round pick for Claude Giroux and a bunch of extra pieces. They're not resting on their laurels. They are making moves that constantly adjust their roster. And I think there's two things that the Devils can learn here. One, so the problem with where Tom Fitzgerald is right now is the Panthers fan base and the Devils fan base is very different. I think the Devils fan base are clutchers. We clutch under our players unless it's like somebody we just despise. Like Damon Severson, we weren't clutching to him, but a lot of people will clutch to a lot of the players on this team. I think if you really look at what the Panthers did that season in 2022, it set the foundation for what they are now. And we talked a little bit about this last week, but I really want to look at how the Devils can emulate that. And I'm going to look at this. I'm going to look at some of the players that the Devils could target. There's some of the obvious ones like JJ Peterka would be one that I think is a guy who's like on the verge. And you're paying what looks like a premium today, but is a penance in 3 years if he hits what you think he's going to do. Or like, Marco Rossi is another guy. I don't love getting smaller, right? But I know he plays big. I don't love getting smaller, but he's a guy that you look at, you're like, there's for some reason he's like on the verge, right? And he's about to explode. It looks like, and you could get him for a mid to late first round pick or equal value. So what does that look like for the Devils doing a first round pick? Is that both of their second round picks and maybe a prospect? Is that a top prospect? You're not trading Nemitz for him because that's kind of counterintuitive to the point you're trying to do. But are you looking at maybe you trade Mercer and other pieces are part of that deal to even it out? And then there's other guys out there. I really want to look and to see if there's some guy, because like Reinhart was in the conversation, but I don't think Bennett was as much. And Bennett's probably going to win the Conn Smythe. And you really want to see, like, now that you have your foundation, and the Panthers had that foundation. They had Ekblad, they have Barkov. There's a couple other guys that have been there for a while, but like to really solidify that foundation. Barkov's the superstar player. Ekblad is the number one overall pick on defense. They had these guys, and they just needed the smart moves around them. And I think that the Devils were on the right track in 2023. I just think they made I'm trying to. I feel like they didn't do enough in 2024. This is the thing: is that like we go into the season being like, this is kind of a glaring hole. Every year there's one. Last year it was the fifth and sixth player on the top six. It's like we're missing kind of like two forwards here, and we're hoping that Dawson Mercer fills that role. And we're hoping like that Tomas Tatar can fill that role. And if Tatar can fill that role, then we're hoping we get a bounce back from Andre Palat. And if we don't get the bounce back from Andre Palat, we're hoping Eric Haula can do it. If we don't get it from Eric Haula, we're hoping that Paul Cotter plays above his head like he did at times in Vegas. If we don't get that, we're hoping that Stefan Nason just becomes great at 5 on. Like it's you're piecing it together. And then the year before is obvious. It's your goalie. You still went in with Vitek Vanacek as your starter when you didn't get Hellebuck. And I get it. The goalie market was psychotic. I do. I'm curious of what the actual price of Hellebuck would have been. And maybe you don't want Hellebuck now because of his playoff potential, but I think with this defense in front of Hellebuck, you'd be in great shape. And then the year, then you go 3 years ago, it was goalie again, right? And honestly, like Fitzgerald kind of got lucky because goalie was the issue, and he fixed it with Vitek Vanacek. And he just went on a 1 year really good run. But I didn't love that going to 23-24, did you?
No.
I was worried about that. And I forget, like, Blackwood was on that team. Or, sorry, 22-23. And Blackwood was on that team. So you're still, like, kind of like, he's holding on to these players too long. But, like, there's the other side of it. Like, I'm on side, don't trade Dawson Mercer. But I've also learned my lesson with Alexander Holtz, because I hated the Holtz trade at first. And now I think it's a clear slam dunk. If anything, Schmid is the one that you're worried about breaking out and playing well, because he had some good stretches for Vegas this year, and for Henderson. But Paul Cotter is very clearly a much better player for this Devils team. I look at the Panthers, and the lesson is not more grit. It is get guys who could play, and that's the other lesson. You got Reinhart and Bennett, who are top 10 picks, who are malleable. You could bring them in and mold them into your system, right? They're not just one-trick ponies. And I think that you look at like the situation that you're in, and if I'm the Devils, like I gotta make some bold moves. Like I'm calling Seattle and saying, what does it take to get Shane right? What does it take? Like, can you give me some like the whole like if Wayne Gretzky got traded, what does it take to get this guy? And if they tell me it's, I don't know, like if you're telling me it's Mercer, Casey, and a first-round pick, I'd really consider that. If you're, and I'd go to, I mean, obviously you're going to Buffalo and saying what's Peterka cost. Obviously, you're going to talk to Reinhart in free agency and see what he costs. I think he's going to be way too expensive. But do you know what I'm writing about today, Sam?
What's that?
And it's delicious. It's delicious. I'm going to write it tonight. It's going to come out tonight. I think the Devils should send an offer sheet. To the Rangers.
That's like stealing one. That's like saying something is delicious at Wawa.
There's plenty of things that are delicious at Wawa. But anyway, no, we're putting them in a bad spot. I want them to offer sheet Will Cooley. This kid,
wow,
looks like he's on the verge. He looks like he might be really good. he put together a pretty good season this year. I see a lot of people be like, well, I think he only had like 40 or 50 points. He looked really good. That Rangers team was a mess, a hot mess express. And he was one small shining moment on that team. I think he would be worth what you pay for him in the offer sheet compensation. I think you could sign him to like you'd have to send him to a 5-year deal just because of offer sheet rules. But I think it'd be well worth it. You can even sign him to a 1-year deal and then sign him to an extension, to a 7-year extension. I think that's a player that if you're going to be Tom Fitzgerald and you're going to go into this with the biggest set of breasts, cojones that you're going to have, you got to look at Bill Zito, and that's the difference between Fitzgerald and Bill Zito. I think Fitzgerald and Zito have the same hockey intelligence level. I think Zito has brass balls. Excuse me, am I allowed to say that? I'm sorry if I'm not, but
look, he's
I
got
think
guts.
he has testicular fortitude.
Yeah,
I think he just has guts. I need Mike O'Malley to start calling Florida Panthers games because that dude has guts, and I think that you have to have a certain level of guts to be a good GM. Now, there's the other side of that where you're Peter Chiarelli, where you're just making the craziest of moves that don't make any sense. There has to be logic in your guts. But the best teams don't have first-round picks. They make it work elsewhere. And I think that the Devils should start using their assets. They have all of these. They also have a lot of prospects. Like, the volume of prospects that they have is unsustainable, especially on defense. They have too many defensemen. They need to offload some of these for help in the NHL. And I'm not talking about Nemitz or even Casey, but VN could be an NHL player. Let him play somewhere else. I thought they wasted Hataka, and now he's overseas. That was blown talent, and I get the injuries, but they kind of blew it there. But there's a couple other defensemen. Charlie Leddy, I have no idea what he's up to, but he's an interesting guy. There's a Karpovich in Russia. I think he's the defenseman now. I'm second guessing myself, but there's just a long list of defensemen who could be decent and could play NHL games. And they did it last year with Ball, right? Ball is a guy who's a 4th or 5th defenseman on most teams, but he's not that in New Jersey. So you use him as an asset. I think the Devils have enough defensemen where they can do that. They have these guys signed to long-term contracts in the NHL. They got lucky with Kovacevic, who turned out to be a really good player. That's how the Devils could play Panthers hockey, is instead of emulating it by signing Sam Bennett or excuse me, or even worse, trying to bring back Boquist and Greer, you go after those other guys at the top to push the other guys down. If you had Paul Cotter and Stefan Nason and even Eric Holla as a 4th line, that's a really good 4th line. And then you can have Brian Hallinan as a fill-in. That you're looking like you're in really good shape. I think that they're gonna find a way to get off Paula, but and if you can push everyone down, let's say they get Paterka, just for argument's sake. So your top line is Paterka, Hughes, and Bratt, and then your second line is Meyer, Heischer, and I think you in a perfect world you want somebody else, and that would push your third line to be Mercer. Who am I missing?
On the third line?
In my world, Palat's been traded, so no Palat. Glass. So your third one would be Glass, Mercer. There's one guy I'm missing. Glass, Mercer.
The silence.
I know. I'm like looking at the whole roster right now. I'm just.
Are you talking about somebody current, or are you talking about,
Somebody's on the team right now.
Okay. I thought maybe, a rookie out there.
Oh, Gritzik. Yeah. No, that's who I'm thinking. It's probably Gritzik would be the guy.
Everybody's high on this guy. Are you sure? Are people sure about this guy?
Yeah.
So I talked to a scout, and he was not high on him at all.
It's fine.
All right.
His skating is great, and that's going to translate to the NHL.
Okay.
And again, like I think that
I
there's
don't think
some
he's a sure thing. I mean, the KHL is different,
I think he's a sure thing as an NHL player. I'm not saying he's going to score 20 goals this year, but as a third liner, if you get 12 to 15, I'm happy. And then it's almost better because then he's going to sign his next contract, and you're not going to have to pay him $8 million a year. You know what I mean? So, but again, I'm asking for third line production from him. And a Mercer Glass Ritzik line, I think, is really good. And I think that's like a really good 4 lines where you are never taking your foot off the gas, which is what the Devils want.
Yeah.
They had that in 22-23. They lost it because their fourth line center got arrested. And their third line center got hurt. And they've been chasing it ever since. And they Fitzgerald went all in on goalie and defense last offseason. He's got to stop doing that. He's got to stop going all in on one position. And I don't think he has a choice this year. I think he has to be smart with his who he adds, because free agency is kind of bad and people are going to get overpaid. The Devils don't have the money to overpay. Even if they trade Palat, they don't have the money to overpay someone. They don't have the money to overpay even a Bennett. But I think he has to be smart. I think he's going to go the trade route. I think that he'll test free agency, but I think here's what I think is going to happen. Just like when the Devils overspent on Palat because they lost Gaudreau, I think teams like Vegas, teams like Seattle, teams like Utah, teams like Carolina are going to go hard after Marner. I think Marner might sign in Florida, like honestly. And then I think Carolina's going to. Here's what I think happens. If I had to predict today, I'd say Marner goes to Florida, Bennett goes to Carolina, and then Anaheim goes on a spending spree because they lost everybody, and it drives the price for everybody up. I think the Devils sit there and kind of have to hope, like, then you're stuck with either paying for Marchand, which I don't think is a bad thing. But he's 30, what is he, 37?
Still effective.
I understand, but he wants to get paid till he's 40. And that's asking a lot. He might be a guy who's effective until he's 40, but it's a risk. You're looking at Marchand, you're looking at like Granlund, who I don't want. Like, I think he's a poison pill. You're looking at, I'm taking Tavares off the table. I would love Tavares, but I don't think he's going to start. Like, I think Claude Giroux's going to get overpaid. I would love Claude Giroux. I think he'd fit here really nicely, but I think he's going to get overpaid. I think he's going to get like $5 to $6 million a year, just based on name value alone. I think Tavares is going to get 6 to 7. That's because if the Leafs aren't paying Marner, like, they have money to spend. But I think you look around. I think you try to find value. That's what the best teams do. It's what teams have done to the Devils. It's what the Boston Bruins did with Pavel Zacha. It's what the Vegas Golden Knights did with Alexander Holtz. Those are very different results, very varied results, but there are options that the Devils have that they can follow the lead of other great teams. And Florida is one of them. But you have to follow it in a way that is intelligent. Look at the moves that made the most sense. And it's Bennett, it's Reinhart, and it's Kachuk. And they did that to build around Barkov. Let's say you don't need to do one of those moves because you have two centers instead of just the one in Barkov. But excuse me, I think you need to have a 2022 offseason where you make two franchise changing trades that don't look like it on the surface, but I think Paterka would be like that. I think Rossi could be like that. I'm going to really dive into some of the guys who haven't hit their ceiling, but I think there's some players out there that the Devils could really utilize. And on top of that, you could sign them to really reasonable deals right now because they haven't hit their ceiling. Cooley would be a great one. Put the Rangers in a bind. Offer him $6 million a year.
Could you imagine if you started an offer sheet war with the Rangers and it was a yearly thing?
I mean, who's coming up that the Devils would be really upset about? I guess Nemitz.
Well, eventually Luke Hughes, but the Devils have to lock him up now.
I mean, if they sign him for 8 years or 7 years this year, then it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, the funny thing, like in the funniest world, it wouldn't be funny to Devils fans, but in the funniest world, the Devils offer sheet Cooley. They let him come here, and they use that extra money to go get Quinn Hughes. From an NHL standpoint, it's great content. It's great storylines. But terrible for the Devils. But it's that would be the funniest thing.
I'm still thinking about your ideas.
I like I said, I told you I was coming in bold. Like I came in hot tonight. It was funny. I was kind of reevaluating my just my list of articles that I have to write. I kind of hit a lot of the ones that I really wanted to hit, but then I just really sat down in the lab and came up with the articles I want to write over the next month. And I was like, oh, this would be a cool idea. Oh, this would be a great idea. Oh, this is something nobody's talking about. So I've come in here with some things locked and loaded. The Cooley thing, I was like, I got to write that tonight. I wrote last night that I think the Devils should – I think James Higgins is going to fall. Everybody tells me I'm crazy. But nobody thought Cole Caulfield was going to fall. He fell at 15. Nobody thought he was going past 7. I think that James Higgins is going to fall in this draft, and I think the Devils should call Columbus and say, what would it take to get 14? And they'd tell you the number. And be like, okay, if a certain scenario happens, we'll make the trade. And you got to be bold. Be bold. Make the bold move. And James Higgins is a bold move. James Higgins, I think, could be in the NHL next year. And if people overthink this and let them fall to 10 to 14 overall, I think the Devils should at least ask, what do you got to lose? And then on top of it, I wrote about the Kreider trade. Chris Kreider is, or the trade rumor, I guess it is right now.
Yeah, I don't think it's official yet.
But that trade, I think it's bad news for the Devils because I think that takes the Ducks out of the Andre Palat sweepstakes. They still have plenty of cap space to afford Palat, but I think Kreider and Palat give you the same value. They do the same thing, right? It's the veteran who you expect to be clutch in the playoffs, who's overpaid right now, but you're okay with that because you're a young team. I don't think they need 2 of those. They already got Killorn, too. I just think it's too much repeated what they already have on the roster, and it doesn't really help them. So if the Kreider trade goes through, that takes probably the second biggest suitor for Palat. I still think Detroit is the most logical destination. A lot of people say go back to Tampa. I don't think it's a terrible idea. They've done this before. They did this with who's the defenseman they have on their team right now? The former Ranger. Callahan? No. White. Who's the former Ranger? I think he was a captain in New York. He was a defenseman. He's on the Lightning now. He went to Nashville. Now he's back to the Lightning. It's not ringing a bell.
It's not Callahan. No.
Anyway, people know what I'm talking about. The Lightning have reunited with players when it makes sense. I think Palat makes sense. But anyway, so I wrote that. I wrote about that last night. That's up on pucksandpitchforks.com.
McDonough?
McDonough, thank you.
Thank you, Robert Isaacson.
I knew he was a Ryan. I couldn't remember his last name.
I always get those two mixed up. I knew Callahan's not playing anymore. So
Yeah, he retired. I have a question for you before we go. So I was going to write about this, but I don't know if there's any point to it. Do you think it's weird that Parise never retired, like officially?
he's holding out for one last dream.
It was bizarre. I was like, why didn't he retire? You know, and maybe it's because, like,
Suter's still playing?
where would he sign a one-day contract? Wouldn't be in New Jersey. They don't like him here. It wouldn't be Minnesota. They kicked him out. He went to Colorado for 1 year, so I guess maybe it's just the fact that he just doesn't have a home. That he doesn't need to announce. You know, there's no point. There's no, like, you know, point to do the press conference because none of these teams are. He didn't win a cup. Kostis came with the Devils, and he immediately spurned them. So I just thought it was interesting. I usually feel like people announce their retirement, right?
Well, I'll tell you, when he spurned the Devils, that whole regime no longer exists. So, you know, the Devils could do a marketing ploy. You know, it's an easy gimmick to put attention on the team. But it would be nice to see maybe one more year. He actually does come back. One more year with the Devils. And I'm not a fan of second tour of duty, but it would make things right.
One more thing I'm going to write about tonight, Sam, and I want your take on this. Did you see Jack Hughes is back on the ice?
Is he? I don't know.
So you haven't seen it. Do you know why he's back on the ice?
Why?
To film an advertisement for Bauer Hockey.
Oh, very nice.
But he's doing drills. But how do you feel about that? The first time we see him on the ice, he's doing a commercial.
Oh, I saw a picture, I think it was from the Devils' social media account of him and Luke, and seeing Luke in that sling was a little disheartening.
From when they were fishing?
Yeah, that's the one. But what was your question again?
How do you feel that the first time we see him back on the ice, it's for a commercial?
I love it.
Okay.
Hey, if Jackie Boy can make some, it's the off season. It's the off season.
Fair.
You can do that stuff in the off season. What I don't like is when the Devils, you know, take these players. Yeah, they should be marketing them, but they distract them, especially with their charity event every year. The next game, they get crushed. You know, the Deck Gala or whatever it's called.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because there's usually a game the next day, right?
Yeah, and they usually get crushed. And there was one year, they got crushed in more ways than one after one of those events. But we won't talk about that.
No.
Yeah.
That was a bad night.
Yeah. That was really bad.
Let's just call it a day.
Yeah.
We'll call those my plugs. pucksandpitchworks.com. I'm gonna have there's gonna be more draft articles coming up over the next week. Excuse me. There's gonna be I don't even know, like, the free agency. There's gonna be reactions to the Stanley Cup final. So much I can't even tell you how much is coming up. We've actually reconfigured some of the roles, and there's more articles that are going to come your way because of it. So go to pucksandpitchworks.com every day. There's new articles every day. It's articles you don't see anywhere else. There's so much noise in the New Jersey Devils beat, and I try to do something different. I don't want to just write what everybody else is writing. So you're going to get something different at pucksandpitchworks.com. So keep going there.
Yeah. Well, I'm looking forward to the Birth of Nations week, which is July 1st and July 4th, because that's usually a great time for free agency hockey.
I'm usually busy.
Yeah. And also the draft beforehand, where you see the future, all that. I'm really looking forward to, after the Stanley Cup finals, getting back in the swing of things as a New Jersey Devils fan. But listen, one thing I love about the Stanley Cup finals, and I didn't think because I'm sort of on a boycott of it because it's the same teams as last season. Yeah. But there's some true animosity right there. There is some. It's vicious, and I'm glad that the emotion is not taken out of the game. I'm glad to see competition at the highest level. I'm glad to see teams doing whatever it takes to get that edge and win and not giving up. And the Edmonton Oilers, even though they were getting blown out, at least trying to be aggressive and playing the Florida Panthers game instead of being passive. I love that stuff. I remember years ago when LeCavier and Iginla were trying to gain every inch, and that fight that they had. That's what Stanley Cup hockey is all about, and it's just, it doesn't matter what team's in it. It's a real pleasure to watch, and the fans enjoying it as well. So
I agree.
Yeah, and I hope the Devils get there.
I think they were making the right moves. I think the Timo Meier move is kind of people don't believe me, but he really does play that style. It's just he's been inconsistent with his production. But if the Devils get under your skin, it's because of Meier. Meier's the guy that's in the middle of it all.
Yeah.
Even the guys who are hitting, like Cotter and Nason and Bastian, they're not getting under their skin. They're just hitting. And good, clean hits. Love it. But Meier's the instigator that's going to get them to play like this. And, I think Nico's a little bit more on board. I think Jack is going to love it. And he's going to love that style. He's not going to get into fights, but he's going to be a guy who just frustrates you because he's going to embarrass you on the ice, right? And it's going to really make you mad. It's going to make you go off your game. So that's it. I think the Devils are I think the Devils could have a transitional off season. I just don't know which way it's going to go.
Yeah. Well, want to thank all those tuning in, dropping the podcast tomorrow or at midnight. Until next time, go to pucksandpitchforks.com. Let's go Devils.